So welcome, everybody. My name is Rich Brownstein, and I'm in Israel on the coast. And I have lectured at Yad Vashem since 2014 for the International School and specialize in the use of Holocaust films in the classroom. And today the topic is going to be Auschwitz films, 75 years of filmmaking, Holocaust filmmaking, and there it is. I have just published a book. A book has been published called Holocaust Cinema Complete, a history analysis of 400 films with a teaching guide. And you can get more information about that at holocaustfilms.com. So the first question is, what are we considering? And I'm talking about here narrative Holocaust films. And so then that would be films, narrative films are stories that are portrayed by actors. So necessarily not documentaries. It includes, by my definition, feature films and made-for-television movies. I don't include shorts. Generally in the count, I don't include miniseries, although miniseries play an important role in the history of Holocaust films, so they're not ignored, they're just not counted. And for a Holocaust film to be considered a Holocaust film, it has to have significant Holocaust content or themes. And to date, that is from 1945, when I start counting, until the end of 2020, the beginning of 2020, 75 years, there are 443 Holocaust films, all of which are listed in my book with summaries. That means that approximately 6 Holocaust films a year have been made, which seems like a lot, but it's really not, considering that 45 countries have made Holocaust films. This shows the production over that 75 years, with television production being the not blue color. And you can see that it just keeps going up. There were years that there was none, but they just keep coming. By country, although it seems like most Holocaust films are American, they're not. 3/4 of all Holocaust films were either produced or co-produced by non-American entities. Significant work, most of the really good work has been done in Europe. Not all, but most. Holocaust media, Holocaust films have had the greatest variety of any genre of filmmaking. That includes features and made-for-television movies, and comedies and farce and science fiction, time travel, animation. There are many animated Holocaust films. Social media now, they're coming out. And so the fact that something is new or being presented as new doesn't mean it's necessarily better. It just means that somebody's trying something new. And most of the things that were presented as new have not succeeded, but they still are tried. For example, there are several time travel films, none of which anybody really recommends. None of the animated films can be recommended. But the reason that one of the reasons we think that there's so many Holocaust films is because they get celebrated at the Oscars very regularly. Of the 77 American produced or co-produced feature films, 21 have been nominated for at least one Oscar. And which is an outrageously high hit rate. It's another question about why, but it's very high. And from 1916 until 2015, on average, one foreign language film has been nominated, which again makes us believe that every film that's made is a Holocaust film. This is a list of Holocaust films that have been nominated that for at least one Oscar, not counting best foreign language. So you can see that the Holocaust film that has won the most Oscars is Cabaret in 1972 with 8, followed by Schindler's List with 7. These are the foreign language films that have been nominated and won. Many of them have disappeared. I break down Holocaust film production into 4 eras. So first, the post-war era, it includes the period where we knew the least about the Holocaust, and we're going to be seeing clips from a few of those films. In the middle of it was the most famous of that period, The Diary of Anne Frank from 1959, which is very hard to watch today. 3 hours of somebody who clearly was not a Holocaust victim, running around on stage talking about things that were irrelevant mostly, with no Jewish content. And then we get to the commercial era that really started with the making of the first miniseries in 1974 called QB7, based on the Leon Uris novel. That's the first miniseries of any kind, not just the first Holocaust miniseries. And that period included the 2 most successful, financially successful Holocaust programs ever, Holocaust, the miniseries in 1978, and Schindler's List. And then we got to the mature era, where production kept going up and quality kept going up. And really the best Holocaust films came out of that period. And then we're in the consolidated era, where pretty much half of every other Holocaust film that comes out is a remake of a previous film. Usually the remakes are better, but we get remakes like the Anne Frank story and Eichmann, Sobibor, Son of Saul. They just keep coming out. Phoenix came out during that period. I break down the films themselves into 4 major categories. The first one is victim films. So if a Holocaust film is about a Jew who is suffering during the Holocaust, then it's a victim film. And there have been 156 victim films. If it takes place during the Holocaust and it's about a Gentile who either helped or hurt the Jews during the Holocaust, then it's a Gentile film. So a righteous Gentile film would be Schindler's List or Irina Sendler. A non-righteous Gentile film would be Conspiracy, about the Wannsee Conference. If it's after the Holocaust and it's about a survivor, then it's a survivor film, like Harold and Maude or X-Men. If it's about a Nazi after the war who gets, usually, unless it's a true story like Eichmann, who gets tracked down and killed without going to trial, but just usually they're fictitious stories, then it's a perpetrator film. And they're the least popular. Then there's but clear Holocaust film, Sophie's Choice. Inglourious Bastards, clearly a Holocaust film, doesn't fit into the categories. Cabaret came before the, it's pre-Holocaust, but clearly it tells a story that needs to be told in relation to the Holocaust. So breaking down the films within these categories allows us to compare them one-on-one, because one could not compare Marathon Man to The Pianist. It would be silly. These are some examples of films in each category. Victim films, righteous Gentile films, survivor films, perpetrator films, and tangential. When I'm judging a film, at whether it's good or bad as a critic, I look at all of these things. But all films, in order to be good, have to have a great story. After that, then costuming and acting and dialogue and music can all make a good film great. But if it doesn't have a good story, then it doesn't matter if it makes money or wins awards, or how great the acting was. For example, The Reader is a story of an East German woman who we feel sorry for being illiterate, and then we find out that she was a Nazi guard who locked 300 Jews into a barn and burnt it down and killed them. And she goes on trial but can't defend herself because she's a Nazi who's illiterate, and we're supposed to feel bad for her being illiterate. It's a bad story to begin with. So it doesn't matter how great Kate Winslet was in it or how many awards she won. She won her first Best Actress award for that. It's still a bad movie. So I look at all of these things when I'm judging films. Now, let's get to the specific topic of the evening, Auschwitz films. Films that talk about Auschwitz, films that are filmed at Auschwitz. And I do this and I thank the National Library for this, the National Library of Israel for having me. We're doing this also in commemoration with International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which commemorates the liberation of Auschwitz. So as early as 1948, Fred Zinnemann made a film called The Search, where he finds a boy who's a survivor. And the next 5 clips are going to be coming from, were compiled in a very good documentary called Imaginary Witness, Hollywood and the Holocaust. So here's the first clip.
Fred Zinnemann's The Search, starring Montgomery Clift, is about a 9-year-old survivor rendered mute by
looked real, and not that they really would have tattooed a child. A was not for Auschwitz. All tattoos came from Auschwitz, but it didn't matter because they didn't know all these things. Later, if a film had shown a tattoo being affixed in a place other than Auschwitz, then it certainly would have been a problem. Then the next film that mattered was called The Pawnbroker, which was directed by Sidney Lumet, and was about a survivor who, and so we see a representation here, a fleeting representation, a repressed representation of a death camp. And here Lumet is being spoken to, not Lumet, the survivor is being spoken to, Rod Steiger, by another survivor who's played by Sidney Lumet's father. So here's that. That's not that clip.
Fred Zinnemann's The In 1965, The Pawnbroker, directed by Sidney Lumet, depicted a Holocaust survivor, Saul Nazerman, who 20 years after the war is still haunted by his experiences.
Tell me, does blood ever flow through you, Saul Nazerman? You breathe, you eat, you walk, you make money. You take a dream and give a dower, and give no hope. I survive. A coward survival, and at what a price. No love, no passion, no pity. Dead. Saul Nazerman, the walking dead.
Unlike mainstream Hollywood efforts, the film attempted to recreate life in a concentration camp.
How do you portray it?
In a film, and it was at a concentration camp. Then we had Harold and Maude, which it was about a survivor. You wouldn't know it unless you paid very close attention, but her being a survivor was the core of the entire story. And so you have films made by great filmmakers who aren't playing, who are getting to the heart of it, even if they're not crushing us with death camps.
Brief Holocaust imagery could be used to imply a backstory that need not
I
be
encourage
embellished.
everybody to see Harold and Maude and to understand that story. Then in '78, of course, was the Holocaust miniseries. Okay, so the Holocaust miniseries, here's the clip.
No, we had a long journey, my friend. Berlin, Warsaw, Auschwitz. Wasn't any vacation. No vacation. We were good friends.
The series was broadcast over 4 consecutive nights in 1978. 1 in every 2 Americans tuned in.
Got vast audience ratings. In New York City, during commercial breaks, the water pressure in the city actually went down because so many people went to the bathroom at the same time. It was a phenomenon, and it was a far greater phenomenon than any of us could have predicted.
Okay. And then we get to Sophie's Choice, where we start to have some really serious representations of Auschwitz. Even though we're not shot at Auschwitz, we start to get a representation. And here's a description of how they were able to do it.
Director Alan Pakula and his crew grappled with the challenge of portraying a fictional Holocaust story accurately and morally. Survivors were hired to consult during production.
Kitty Hart was a survivor of Auschwitz, and she was our consultant. She was meticulous in recounting the daily little bits of life in that horror place. And one of the things that she told us was the Auschwitz walk, because Auschwitz was most of the year, the time she was there, she remembered it as always muddy. And the Auschwitz walk consisted of moving your feet and aiming at the other people who came before you with their footprints. So you wouldn't have to plow in and plow up mud, which was so hard to do with no energy. So it became almost a way of life, of survival there, to walk that way.
So that's the early work. Now we start to get to things that are actually filmed at Auschwitz. Fortunately, the first film, War and Love, you will never see because it's a horrible film with Kira Sedgwick. Nonetheless, Yad Vashem says in their online database that it was to be made at Auschwitz, an event generating media attention. Then we had War and Remembrance, which again, Elie Wiesel lashed out at. And here was the promo for that.
Moments in War and Remembrance, unlike anything you've ever seen on television. Moments that will haunt you, shock you. But remember these moments because they really happened.
Remember them so that they will never happen again. And remember us, starting Sunday at 8, 7 Central.
Of that, Steven Spielberg said that he has never seen a more violent film since before. He believes that War and Remembrance, the miniseries, was excessive, and watching it seems as long as the war itself. But the reason that I mention it, and they do have interesting Auschwitz representations, is because they also, it is regarded as the first film to be shot at Auschwitz, which is fascinating. And then we have the film Triumph of the Spirit, which is about a boxer.
From Arnold Copelson, the Academy Award-winning producer of Platoon, comes Triumph of the Spirit, a true story of one man's fight for survival and victory in the face of death.
You must understand the officers bet on these fights.
How many rounds?
You fight till one goes down and can't get up.
Which was also thought to be the first film to be shot at Auschwitz. I have to say before I go on that in War and Remembrance, permission was given to shoot at Auschwitz, but only if, and explicitly only if, there is no mention of Polish anti-Semitism in the script or in the production. So after Triumph of the Spirit, there was a review. Well, I'll just show you these first. These are the actual first films that were shot at Auschwitz. Many of them you've never heard of. Most of them came from the Eastern Bloc, but jingoistically, American press said that those other films were shot there. There is one in particular that shows a young man, a writer, a Polish writer who's not Jewish, and he goes to Auschwitz to really clear his head and be able to write again. And the entire time that he's in the Auschwitz Museum, he's trying to pick up a girl. So the fact that these things were made does not mean that they were great or Jewish or anything other than a representation of perhaps Soviet or communist suffering during the war, but many films had been shot there. But that really raises the question, if something's shot at Auschwitz, does that make it authentic or better necessarily than a film that's shot somewhere else but represents Auschwitz? And Roger Ebert, the great film critic, wrote of the boxing film Triumph of the Spirit, "I'm impressed by the attention to detail demonstrated, but I do not consider it a certificate of authenticity." So he's saying you can shoot it anywhere you want, but it doesn't mean that it's great. And in fact, all of these films and more, many of which you would recognize, were shot about Auschwitz. I'm going to show you a clip of several of these. The most infamous film is called The Day the Clown Cried, which has never been seen by the public. It was made by Jerry Lewis, and he directed it and he acted in it. And it was so dismal that he vowed never to let it be seen in his lifetime. And after he died, he donated it to the National Library in Washington, and said that 10 years after his death, it could be seen, which will be in 2 more years. But those who have seen it have been aghast. And you can go onto YouTube and see parts of it. Here's a little bit for us to know about it.
The movie was to release in 1972 and starred iconic American comedian Jerry Lewis, who also directed. The movie followed an over-the-hill German clown, Helmut Durk, in early days World War II Germany. Durk is arrested by the Gestapo for being critical of Hitler.
Once incarcerated, he finds meaning by performing for incarcerated Jewish children, despite resistance from German officers. They eventually force him to accompany the children to Auschwitz, where he leads them to gas chambers, deciding ultimately to die with the children that he loved.
And that, in fact, that plot was used later in a very good film called The Last Butterfly, about a comedian actor who goes to Theresienstadt. But Jerry Lewis was right not to have let it be seen. Then we have the very famous film Life is Beautiful, which won the 3 Academy Awards, and basically makes a mockery of Auschwitz. I'll talk about it after the clip.
He has met the woman of his dreams, and he'll do everything in his power to sweep her off her feet and carry her away. Now, his fairy tale life takes a serious turn. To protect his family, this loving father has to turn the hard truth into a simple game.
So people walked away from that film and they thought that Auschwitz, which is implied, it's not specified, but everybody knows it was supposed to be Auschwitz, that Auschwitz was a place where you can clown around with your kid and play like Andy and Opie and Mayberry. But that's not what it was, obviously. And really, the way that we know that ultimately, even though Life is Beautiful was the second highest grossing foreign film in American history, that it was a failed project is because since 1997, when that film was made, of the many films about concentration camps, none have employed a fictional plot except for one horrible film called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
I wish you'd remembered chocolate. Yes, I'm sorry. I know. Perhaps you can come and have supper with us sometime. I can't, can I? Because of this. But that's to stop the animals getting out, isn't it? Animals? What people getting out? Are you not allowed out? Why? What have you done? I'm a Jew. I think I should go now. Will you be here tomorrow? I'll try. Goodbye then.
It's just abusive to think that 2 kids are going to be playing next to an electrified fence with guards around. It's abusive to the audience to think that these stories, which are heart-rending, heartbreaking, should have any impact educationally or culturally, yet they do. I urge anybody who loved these films to take another look at them in light of that. Then we have a film called X-Men, a whole series, which people forget. The beginning, the entire series is based on this opening. I'll show you a little bit of it, of the victim who becomes a survivor and uses the persecution of Jews as a metaphor. So whether you like the series or not, it's just impossible to disregard the Auschwitz content of it. And in X-Men First Class, the first 10 minutes are spent there, really hashing out that whole story of what happens right after that. There's a film that was made called Auschwitz, which you can see at the bottom, 2011. It is such a horrible film that it's rated on IMDb 3.1. And if you're skittish, then you should not watch this clip. But it shows everything. And the clip is brief, but the film shows everything. And it demonstrates that just because you show everything doesn't mean you're a good film. It just means that you have no filter. But as I said, you can show things and not tell any story and just have shock value. And we don't know what's too far until people go too far. And he certainly went too far. And then we have the most famous Holocaust film ever made, which I don't recommend, and that's called Schindler's List. And I'll say briefly why I do not recommend it. And then I'll show you the clip that that is the most shocking to me. I don't think that a Holocaust film made about a Nazi saving Jews from Germans is the correct perspective of the Holocaust. And only Steven Spielberg, for whom I have great respect, who is a great man, he could only make a film like this about the most impossible situation. Nonetheless, it's not the situation of the Holocaust. There are many other films that were made about many other righteous Gentiles who saved thousands and thousands of Jews, including Wallenberg and D'Souza, and many others. But they didn't have the Spielberg touch. And so we don't know about them as much as we do about Schindler. I also object to the linkage between, at the end of the film, between the Holocaust and the state of Israel, which is a long discussion. I also do not believe that when telling a story that you should need 3.25 hours to tell an hour-and-a-half story. But the thing that I absolutely can't forgive is the shower fake-out scene, where he implies that these Jews who just came off of a transport to Auschwitz knew that they were going to be killed, yet walked into a gas chamber, that they knowingly waited for the gas to come down, and that he makes the audience sweat this out, like in Indiana Jones, where he just throws Indy into a pit of snakes. Here, the shower wasn't like that. It wasn't there were no dual purpose showers like this. People, they weren't hermetically sealed. Yet he created this fiction. And here, for those who don't remember, here's what it looked like. they go into a place that has no windows. The lights go out. It's dark. And then suddenly the lights come back on. There are windows. People don't know what's coming down. And just for the record, this is what the shower really looked like at Auschwitz. It wasn't hermetically sealed. So the entire thing was just to scare us. And Spielberg, who went to great efforts in much of this film to have authenticity, failed in this regard and in many others here. Now I wanted to highlight some great representations of Auschwitz in film. I'm going to show you a few here. The first one is called God on Trial, which is one of the few films that deals with Holocaust theology. There have been criticisms about it that it isn't Jewish theology, which I disagree with, but nonetheless, it deals with Holocaust theology, which aside from a film called The Quarrel, it just doesn't happen in Holocaust films. Here's a clip.
God is demanding a Holocaust, a sacrifice of the best Jews.
He is, he does nothing about his legal bastard.
Just shut up.
We should put the bastard on trial.
What is the charge?
What is the charge? Murder.
The argument returns to its beginning. If you're going to put the vote now, I vote guilty.
Free will my ass. I'll give you free will.
The court didn't ask you to speak. We must have order. We're talking about the covenant. The covenant that promises that we shall survive. Survive as a people and not be annihilated.
It's great. The only criticism I really have of God on Trial is that they don't really show Birkenau or Auschwitz. They show they built a barracks, and you don't get to see much. Fateless, and it's about a boy who I'm getting a signal that we're having an instability with the internet, so let me know if we have a problem. It's about a Hungarian boy, basically outlives the Holocaust, and the acting is great, and the cinematography is great. So we'll see this clip.
Némileg zavart, hogy egyetlen szót sem értettem abból, amit Istennek mondtunk.
Én ezt a különbséget nem itt hordom, hanem magamban.
All right. And the next film I'm going to show won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. It is an incredible representation, Son of Saul, incredible representation of Birkenau. And the story is going to be familiar to anybody who's seen The Gray Zone. During the revolt of Birkenau. And it gives you the feeling of claustrophobia and of doom all around. Son of Saul does. Here's a view of that. My major criticism of Son of Saul is that the protagonist is doing something that's crazy. He's not trying to help in the revolt. He's trying to bury somebody who's not his son, who he's taken as his son, as a form of redemption. And it's not great from a storytelling perspective or a Holocaust perspective, but it is a great representation of Birkenau. Finally, revolt. It was not filmed at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and most of these weren't. They just represent it. This was filmed in Sofia, and here's the clip.
So easy to forget who we were before, who will never be again.
The sooner you shower, the sooner you'll be fed and reunited with your families.
Remember the number of the hook you hang your clothes on.
He's a liar. I can't believe it's Jews doing this.
Do you want to look anyone in the face, if any of your family's even alive? What you've done for a little more life, for vodka and bed linens.
In order to survive, they did the unthinkable.
We don't kill people. We put them in the rooms, walk them in and strip them. Look them in the face and say it safe. What the hell is that?
But it gave them the chance to attempt the impossible.
There's going to be an uprising. We're going to destroy the crematorium.
There's a young girl on that cart who survived the gas. She's still breathing. She'll be burned alive.
And what do we do with her?
She'll never make it. We want the girl to live.
If we want to accomplish anything, it has to be one thing. The crematorium.
I pray to God we save you. I want them to save you more than I want anything.
And the last film I'm going to talk to you about, and then I'll open up to questions, is called The Birch Tree Meadow. It's a French film about a survivor who in her 60s goes back to Birkenau to cleanse herself. The first scene, the first part of this clip that I'm going to show, you see her at a nightclub in Krakow. And anybody who has been on one of these trips to Auschwitz knows that in the evening after people go to the camps, often they go to these bars to unwind. And she sees kids there, Israeli kids there, who are doing that and remembers her childhood. It's in French. But I don't think it's really important. I think you'll get a feeling about it regardless.
Les femmes SS sont entrées. Elles ont demandé s'il y avait des musiciennes. Une petite voix a répondu « Moi, je suis danseuse à l'opéra. » Une femme SS a dit « C'est bien, montre-nous ce que tu sais faire. » Et elle s'est mise à faire des pointes et des jetés battus, toute nue avec son crâne rasé dans un silence total. Elle s'appelait Laurette. Elle devait avoir à peu près 15 ans comme moi. Laurette. Ich bin 75.750. Je suis vivante. Je suis vivante. Vivante. 2, 3, 4, links. Links. Links.
It is a great survivor movie, and it's very hard to find. And if you can track it down, you should see it. And this is my book, and there's the table of contents. You can see what the topics discussed. And I will now turn it back over. And
thank you very much, Rich.
Okay.
So there are a few questions. I apologize in advance to those I will skip over. You will get a chance to ask more questions at the end of the Q&A section. Sandy asked, do you know which movies were books first?
The Book Thief was obviously a book first, and I don't consider it a Holocaust film, but it was, I think, more of a Holocaust book. The Devil's Arithmetic, which is a very bad Holocaust film, a time travel film, was a book first. The Diary of Anne Frank was a book first. Schindler's List was Schindler's Ark. There are many. In most cases, it's not really relevant. The interesting fact is that Elie Wiesel didn't let any of his books get turned into major motion pictures. All right.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuel asked, which producer or director made more films about the Holocaust? Who and how many?
Well, the director who made the most, there's one director an Israeli director named Eli Cohen, who made three, two of which I recommend, The Quarrel and Summer and Under the Dunam Tree. And he also made Summer of Avia. A director named Holland Angieska, I can't pronounce her first name very well. She's made three very high profile films that include Europa, and Angry Harvest and In Darkness. I'm not a big fan of her work. But and then Edrez Wajda, who made four, including Holy Week, Korzak, and Samson, which a young actor, Roman Polanski, was in 1961. And Angelique Holland wrote the Korzak script. Several others have made three, but one producer has produced more than anybody, and his name was Art Brunner, and he produced 316 films, and depending on how you count them, 20 of them approximately are in the book, counted as Holocaust films, including the Finzi Contini, which was co-produced by Arthur Cohen. And there are actors who have been in a million too, most notably Maximilian Schell and Armin Mueller-Stahl. They've been in so many that it's hard to count.
Thank you very much. So Sandy asked a question that a lot of people are interested in as well. The first question was, which films would you say are suitable for education or educational for students ages 14 plus? Seems to me it's a huge hole in Holocaust education, and that's where it's most needed. She also asked for recommendations of books for tweens, and Amy answered Devil's Arithmetic is a good book for tweens, and Anna wrote Imre Kertz's book Faithlessness, something like that.
Faithless.
In any case, yeah. In any case, what would you recommend for tweens, and do you have any further reading for those ages?
Right. So in my book, I have an entire chapter that's about Holocaust pedagogy using films and otherwise, and it includes a list of books. There are dozens and dozens of titles that are listed in here that are recommended by various sources. So those questions will be answered in chapter 8 of my book, really like dozens and dozens of books. Regarding what films, it depends on what your goal is. If you've already taught a semester of Holocaust studies, then a film teaches, then you would choose a particular film, as opposed to if you're just talking about a specific topic. So, for example, if you were talking about the Wannsee Conference and conspiracy, if you were talking about the French Roundup in Paris, then you do the. All right. So, in my book, in chapter 8, the entire chapter is about Holocaust pedagogy and how what films to use. It also has a list of 20 or 30 books, but it also has topics. So if you're studying the Warsaw Ghetto, then for 14-year-olds, you might use the Island on Bird Street. But if you're studying the French Roundup, then you might study The Two of Us or the RAF, or at the Wannsee Conference, then you might show conspiracy, or the T4 program, Amen. So it depends, and they're all listed in the book, many objectives and the films that go with them. So I know that's self-serving, but that's what I would recommend.
Thank you very much. Nomi asked, I'm wondering why The Last Stage is not included in your summary. It was filmed in 1947, I believe.
The Last Stage is not included in which summary? That would be that's it's listed. It's listed. It was on the list of films that were shot there, and it's in my book. So I'm not sure what she's referring to. It's not a film that I necessarily recommend because I don't think it's very accessible, but it's listed.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Which films, Elaine asked, which films seem to be produced to make Gentiles feel good about themselves? Which films seem to support Dara Horn's thesis, people love dead Jews?
Well, it's a loaded question. Let me just say this. There was a genre. First, the Germans have made great Holocaust films, many great Holocaust films, but there was a point at which there were some German filmmakers who made films, and the point of it was that the Holocaust was not perpetrated by Germans, but by Nazis. And that's a distinction that they no longer abide by. But there are two in particular, two shorts, one called Toyland and the other one called The Porcelain Unicorn, that have this narrative. I don't think that I don't like Jojo Rabbit, and I think that was intended to make some Jews feel good. So, I mean, I don't like the premise of the question. The films are made to make money, and for a lot of reasons, that doesn't work for me. Next question.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question before we open up for viewers. What have been the successes and failures of this project?
Oh, so my book has, I've been very pleased that I've reached so many people with it. and it's gotten a lot of good press, and I'm grateful for it. The one thing that I've had trouble doing is reaching out into the non-Jewish community. So anybody who has any suggestions as to how I can do that, and whether it's speaking opportunities or otherwise, contact me at my website, holocaustfilms.com, and I'd love to get your suggestions as to how I can reach out further.
Thank you very, very much. There was one more request for you to put up your book and contact info there, and I will now open the microphones for people. Thank you all for being here. I'm opening the microphones in Laila Tov from Jerusalem.
Thank you so much for all your help. It was such an honor to be part of this, and thank you to the National Library. Hello.
Thank you, Rich. Yes, thank you, Rich Brownstein. The microphones are open.
Hi.
Could you recognize who's to speak?
Hello. It sounds like John was speaking. John Matthews.
Yes. John Matthews, thank you. Currently from California, but also from Minnesota. I would like to, for Richard, thank you so much for all of this, and everybody could say that. This is very enlightening, and I will secure your book. I have been working on this. I happen to be a Lutheran pastor of 45 years, but for 40 of those years studied Holocaust matters, specifically the church. And the thing I guess I would like to just add to your comment on Schindler's List, which doesn't invalidate or critique something, it just adds something to it. I'd watched that too and have some of the similar reactions, but for me, there was one scene in there that would, if I could say, redeem, or for Christian people listening, is worth the price, the entrance fee. And that is when, I think it was Amon Goeth, but he was in a basement room with his servant girl or something. I haven't watched it in the last 4 or 5 years, so I'm not clear on exactly who that was. But what was educational beyond words was when he was attracted to her as a human being, as a young girl, and then in the flash of a second, he remembered that she was Jewish, and his behavior turned 180 degrees. I thought that one little snip was simply educational, because in asking this question of how can human beings do what they do, that scene doesn't answer it all. It simply raises to a higher level that switch in pathology or human observance. So I just lift up that one example as one for me, at least from the Christian side of the house, thinking of this as in human behavior and all. Anyway, that was very important for me, but I only say that to compliment.
Well, John, I think it's important. Two things. Steven Spielberg can make anybody appear to be anything. So the fact that he humanized him there, to me, is not, it's not more meaningful than the color of the dress or the coat or anything else, any of his other tricks in there. I had an educator who I was from South Africa, who I was teaching at a seminar at Yad Vashem, and she told me how important Schindler's List is in South Africa. And I said to her, as a redemption story, and I said to her, well, if you're teaching about redemption, then it may be a great story, but if you're teaching about the Holocaust, then it's not the story. You can find great things in Schindler's List, but you shouldn't have to search for them in a film, and you shouldn't have to wade through 195 minutes to get to them. And at the end, you shouldn't have to be misled about important details. And my mother, by the way, was from St. Paul. So there you go. The next question.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm from Ghent in Belgium, but originally from Holland, from the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in Ghent as a student in the Academy of Fine Arts, and in '85, other students told me that a film of Shoah from Claude Lanzmann came out. And I saw the film, the documentary, from first minute until the last. And in fact, I never saw any other film anymore.
Right.
This documentary of more than 9 hours interviews was clear enough.
Right, but first of all, I don't do
21 years old.
No, it had a great impact on me too. In fact, I was 22. I was 23, and I was on the board of directors of the Oregon Holocaust Center, and we had a big gala screening for the community 2 nights, and it was important. But it's also been important to me personally because I've seen educators talk about using Shoah in classrooms, and I think it's educational malpractice, unless you're a doctoral student, to be subjected to a 9.5-hour documentary, which is so subtle that it's a great leap of faith to think that people are going to be able to understand, that the students are going to be able to understand what's going on in that film. So as filmmaking, as Holocaust filmmaking, it's tremendous. As a pedagogical tool, it's too unwieldy to be used, except by aficionados. But yes, Claude Lanzmann set the standard in a lot of ways, and good for him. I mean, it's great. All right. So somebody's asking me about paperclips. How do I feel about paperclips? Paperclips is another documentary about the idea that you can, that you should put a number, make people internalize a number about of Jews who died during the Holocaust, which is a discredited pedagogical method at this point. That that people tried to do this and searched to find a way to teach the Holocaust is really the interesting part of it. But pedagogically, so you get 6 million paperclips, does it mean that you now have empathy? Or would you rather that they spent the time studying about the Wannsee Conference, or about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, or about why the Americans didn't bomb Auschwitz, or a million, or about Chamberlain, or anything? There's so many things to learn instead of trying to give people a feeling. If you teach well enough, then you shouldn't have to teach somebody a feeling. And paperclips implies that a feeling has to be taught. Who else has a question?
Regarding empathy, which film or films maybe would have the best ability to portray what was lost? Coming from my perspective, I'm not a Jew, but I see, I'm a Christian, and I see, as many I suppose do, but the Jewish nation contributed so much to the world, and there was so much that was lost when all these people were gone. It's a tragedy, but it doesn't, it seems to me if there could be more of a recognition of that, it would also help to prevent similar tragedies like Rwanda or others, the loss in human potential. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea, which is that knowledge of genocide means that there won't be genocide. And yet everybody knows what happened in the Holocaust in the world. That is, everybody, world leaders and the intellectuals throughout the world have all known what happened in the Holocaust. Yet we had the Cambodian and Rwandan and Bosnian and Uyghur, and I'm sure I'm missing some. So simply knowing about the Holocaust that's not the point. It can't, to make it into something other than to give it to make it a goal, to make the goal of Holocaust education anything other than Holocaust education, it doesn't work, because it allows people to subvert it as Zionist education, which a lot of people do, and which Spielberg tried to do, or religious, to try to end apostasy or make people more religious, or anti-German, or anti-fascist, or anti-anything, to ascribe to it a purpose other than history and education, means that it can be hijacked and co-opted. So for me, the idea to teach the Holocaust is simply to teach the Holocaust, and that it is inherently something that we need to learn, as we need to learn world history. And the fact that we have the tools to do it now just allows us to do it better. So that's my take on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other questions? I see that somebody mentioned the really interesting film Inheritance about the person in Germany who realized that her father had been the subject of Schindler's List, of the Commandant. Fascinating movie. Who else?
Emmanuel has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
You have to unmute, sir.
No, we're gonna ask you to unmute there. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Rich, for this. Thank you, Rich, for this great evening. And I would like to give a praise for the German filmmakers. One of them, Atze Brauner, German Jewish from Berlin, who produced close to 200 films dealing with the Holocaust. I worked with him on 8 feature films in Germany when I came from New York. And I must brag that I worked on 15 documentaries about the Holocaust. One of them was Oscar nominee, and All Jews Out, Alle Juden Raus. And my protagonist will be speaking this Thursday at the German Berlin Bundestag Parliament about her story from Theresienstadt. And we'll talk about the films that I made with her, 3 films which influenced also Spielberg to make the Schindler's List through his mother, Leah. Thank you for the evening.
Yeah, no, I mentioned him, Arthur Brauner. I may not have said it in pronounced his name well enough, and that he produced with Arthur Cohen, who I'm sure you also are friends with, because it's a small world.
Right.
But his Arthur Cohen's grandkid went to day school in Jerusalem with my son. So we all know each other in one way or another.
Yeah, he lives 200 yards from me here.
In Jerusalem. Wonderful. Any other questions? Raised hands or otherwise? Thank you.
Yes, I think we don't have any more questions. Thank you all once more for being here. And thank you again, Rich Brownstein.
Thank you, Doron. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you very much. Laila Tov from Jerusalem, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Laila Tov.
Thanks, Rich. Keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. Excellent.
Thank you, Ms. Astarian.
Yasher Koch.
Thank you.